My wife cheated on me with our best friend, and now she's trying to take half of our $750, $0 house and $200, $0 in bank assets by starting a messy divorce. Plus, I just found out she secretly borrowed $50, $0 from her boss right before she left. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, and honestly, I still can't believe how everything unraveled so fast. One day, I was just going about my usual routine, thinking my marriage was solid. Sure, we had our disagreements, but nothing I thought I couldn't handle. Then, out of nowhere, I stumbled on something that changed everything. A series of texts, emails, and small clues that made it painfully clear that my wife was cheating on me with our best friend, Mark. It all started with a gut feeling, nothing specific, just this nagging sense that had been acting weird. She'd come home late more often, seemed distracted, and I noticed her phone was constantly glued to her hand. She was bitchy about small things, snapping at me over nothing and brushing off my questions like I was paranoid. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that maybe she was stressed at work or dealing with something personal. But then I found her phone one evening when she left it on the kitchen counter, something she never did, by accident, I guess. I saw a message thread with Mark. At first, I thought it might be innocent. Maybe just some friendly banter, right? But then I read the words, "Can't wait to see you tonight and don't forget what we talked about." My stomach dropped. I scrolled further and there were dozens of texts, flirty, intimate, downright inappropriate. They talked about meeting up, about plans that clearly weren't for just hanging out as friends. And the worst part, she'd been hiding this for months. I checked her emails next. More evidence. Secret bank transfers, late-night calls, and even a sneaky message about a loan she'd secretly taken from her boss, David, just before she left for her trip last week. $50,000. She'd borrowed it right before she left, and I had no idea. I couldn't believe it. The woman I loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything, was lying to my face. She told me she was going to visit her sister out of town, but she was really with Mark. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't just the betrayal, though that cut deep. It was the fact that she'd been sneaking around, lying to me, and even borrowing money from her boss. I started to think about all the signs I'd missed. Her secretive phone habits, her sudden interest in her appearance, the way she'd avoid certain questions about her whereabouts. All of it added up to one terrible truth. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what I'd just found. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? How could she do this to me? After everything we built, how could she cheat with our best friend? The betrayal was so personal, so devastating, I felt like I was losing myself. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I kept staring at the phone, the evidence flashing in my mind, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and total disbelief. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew my life was about to change forever. The next morning, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I woke up early, feeling like I was walking through fog. My mind kept circling around the same questions. How long had this gone on? How much did I really know? And most of all, how was I supposed to face her after everything? I decided I needed answers, so I waited until she was still asleep, then quietly grabbed her phone from the bedside table. I wasn't planning to snoop, at least not that blatantly, but I felt like I had no choice. I needed to know the full extent of her lies. As I scrolled through her messages, my stomach clenched with each word. There were more explicit conversations, plans for secret meetups, and even a few suggestive photos she'd sent Mark. I could see the way she wrote about him, flirty, careless, almost like she was daring someone to notice how deep she was into this. Then I saw the part that made my blood run cold, a message from her, sent just days before she left town. She asked her boss, David, for that $50, $0 loan. She claimed it was for some urgent home repairs, but I knew better. I knew she'd lied. Borrowing that kind of money secretly, especially from her boss, was reckless. It meant she was desperate or reckless or both. I wondered what she'd promised him in return. Had she been planning this? Had she been lying to me even before she left? I carefully put the phone back where I found it, my mind spinning. I felt sick, betrayed, furious. I had trusted her and she'd been lying right in front of my face. I couldn't believe she'd gone this far, cheating with Mark, borrowing thousands from her boss and then trying to keep it all hidden. The worst part was I had no idea how long she'd been doing this. Had she planned this all along, or was it a sudden decision? Either way, I knew I couldn't stay silent. I decided I needed to confront her face to face. I waited until she was in the shower, then I called her phone. No answer. I left a message telling her I knew everything, that I'd seen the texts, the emails, the loan. I told her I was coming home early from work and that we needed to talk. When she finally came home that evening, she looked guilty, nervous even. She tried to play it cool, acting like I was overreacting, saying I was paranoid. But I wasn't buying it. I told her I knew about the affair, the money, everything. That's when she started to lie, trying to deny it all, calling me crazy, saying I was just imagining things. But I had proof, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The confrontation was intense. She yelled, called me controlling, said I was overreacting because I didn't give her enough attention lately. She claimed Mark was just a friend, that nothing was going on, that I was jealous and paranoid. But I knew better. I saw how she looked at him in those texts. I saw how she'd been sneaking around behind my back. Her words felt hollow. She was lying so blatantly I wondered if she even believed her own bullshit. I felt a mixture of heartbreak and rage. How could she do this? How could she betray me, our marriage, our life together over some guy? That night I was a mess. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, her lies, her betrayal, the way she dismissed me like I was nothing. I felt humiliated, angry, and deeply hurt. I'd always thought we were solid, a team. Turns out I was just fooling myself. The woman I loved had been secretly cheating on me, borrowing money and planning her escape with our best friend. I knew I had to make a decision, whether to fight for the marriage or cut my losses. But right now, all I felt was a crushing sense of betrayal and a burning desire for justice. Over the next few days, everything felt like a blur. I couldn't concentrate at work, and every time I looked at, I saw her differently, like she was a stranger hiding a terrible secret. I kept thinking about the house, our shared life, the money we'd earned together, $750, zero in that house, plus $200, $0 sitting in our bank accounts. It all suddenly felt like a ticking time bomb. She was already talking about divorce, about splitting everything down the middle, claiming she deserved half because she was entitled after all these years. She even threw in the line about how I was supportive enough. What pushed me over the edge was discovering the loan from her boss. I found out she borrowed $50, $0 just before she left, secretly, without telling me. I couldn't believe she'd risked everything for some kind of affair, and then she'd gone and borrowed that kind of money. That's when I realized I had to act fast. I started digging into her bank accounts, trying to find out what she'd done with the money, how much she'd taken out, and whether she'd been planning this all along. One night I sat down with my laptop, going through all her financial statements. I noticed some suspicious transactions, small withdrawals, transfers to some unknown accounts, and what looked like payments to a private investigator. My stomach sank. She'd obviously been planning her escape, maybe even hiring someone to cover her tracks or dig up dirt on me. The more I looked, the angrier I got. How could she do this? How could she betray me so thoroughly? I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I started talking to a lawyer just to get a sense of what I was up against. Turns out she's already talking about divorce papers, and she's planning to claim she's entitled to half the house and all the assets, $950, zero total. She's also already hired a divorce attorney, and I can tell she's trying to spin this in her favor, making it sound like I'm the bad guy. That's when I realized I needed to turn the tables. If she wanted a messy divorce, I'd give her a fight. I also found out about the $50, $0 she borrowed. She'd lied to her boss, claiming it was for something personal, but I knew better. She used that money to fund her affair, probably pay off Mark or even cover some of her expenses while she was sneaking around. That's when I decided I'd gather all the evidence I could, screenshots, bank statements, her texts, and use it against her. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going down without a fight. The thing that really broke me was realizing how much she'd lied to me, how she'd been pretending everything was fine while secretly planning her escape. I felt like a fool. I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, my money, and she'd thrown it all away. For some guy. But I also knew I couldn't let her walk away with everything, not without a fight. I started making a plan to protect my rights, to keep what's mine, and to make sure she doesn't take advantage of me in the divorce. So I sat down that night, determined to get my ducks in a row. I contacted my lawyer, started drafting a timeline of everything I'd uncovered, and made a list of the key evidence I needed to present. I knew this was going to get ugly, but I was ready. I wasn't going to let her take half of our house, our savings, or the money she'd secretly borrowed from her boss. She thought she could cheat her way out of this, but I was going to make sure she paid the price for what she'd done. The days that followed felt like walking through a minefield. Every time I thought about what she had done, cheating, lying, sneaking around, I felt a surge of rage. Was trying to spin it all, claiming I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I didn't understand her. But I had the evidence now. Everything was laid out in black and white, and I was ready to use it. Still, I knew I had to be smart. This wasn't just about catching her. It was about protecting myself and my assets. One thing that kept me up at night was the house. It's worth about $750, $0, and she's already talking about half of it. I mean, I get it. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership. But I've worked my ass off for that house. I paid for most of it, and I'm not about to just hand over half because she decided to cheat. I started researching how divorce laws work in our state and what I could do to ensure I got what I deserved. I found out I could file for a legal separation, which would give me some leverage, and I could also fight her claims for half based on her contribution, especially since she's the one who betrayed me. Meanwhile, kept trying to act innocent, accusing me of being jealous or insecure. She was bitchy, snapping at me over small things, trying to make me look like the bad guy. She even accused me of controlling her, which made me laugh bitterly. Control? After. She's been sneaking around, borrowing money behind my back and lying about everything. That's rich. I knew her game and I wasn't falling for it anymore. I started documenting her behavior, saving texts, recording her calls when I could, and gathering proof that she was trying to manipulate the situation. Then I found out she'd already hired a divorce attorney, some hotshot who was promising her she'd get a fair split of everything. I knew I had to step up my game. I met with my lawyer, who told me I had a strong case, especially since I could prove the affair, the secret loan, and her attempts to hide assets. We started working on a strategy. I'd file for divorce, request an immediate freeze on the assets, and demand an audit of the bank accounts to uncover any hidden money. I also made sure to get a forensic accountant involved to trace every penny she'd borrowed or transferred. That night I sat down and drafted a timeline of everything I'd uncovered: her affair with Mark, the secret loan, the suspicious transactions, her attempts to hide the money. It was a brutal exercise, but I knew it was necessary. I also drafted a list of what I wanted in the divorce settlement: full custody of our house, the bank accounts, and a fair division of assets. I wasn't going to let her take half just because she wanted to play the victim. I also started thinking about her reaction. I knew she'd try to spin it all, say I was the one controlling or jealous, that I was overreacting. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had enough evidence to destroy her case if it came to that. Plus, I was determined to protect what I'd worked for: my house, my savings, my dignity. I realized I was in this for the long haul and I had to stay focused. The most unsettling part was knowing she was already planning her next move. I found out she'd been talking to her lawyer about filing first, trying to gain the upper hand. But I wasn't going to let her do that easily. I was ready for a fight. I just wished I could turn back time, go back to when I trusted her and didn't know about any of this. But now, all I could do was prepare myself for the fallout and make sure she didn't walk all over me. The tension in the house was unbearable, acted like nothing had changed, but I knew better. She was trying to act sweet, trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty or second-guessing myself, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I had the evidence and I had the upper hand. Still, I knew I needed to be cautious. She was bitchy, confrontational, and desperate. Her back was against the wall, and I had to be ready for anything. I decided to confront her again, this time with my lawyer's advice in mind. I sat her down in the living room, looked her straight in the eyes, and told her I knew everything. I mentioned the texts, the secret loan, the bank transfers. I laid out the facts in a calm, controlled way, not giving her the chance to deny or spin her story. Her face turned red and she started to sputter, trying to deny it all, claiming I was crazy or paranoid. But I had the screenshots, the bank statements, and the proof of the loan. I told her I was filing for divorce and that I was taking steps to protect my assets. Her reaction was classic bitchy, defensive, and aggressive. She yelled at me, called me controlling and jealous, accused me of not supporting her enough. Her voice cracked when she said, "You don't own me. I can do what I want," like that somehow justified her actions. I just sat there listening, feeling a mixture of anger and disappointment. I knew I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, trust, and the fact that she'd betrayed everything we had. The next few days were chaos. She started packing her stuff, acting like she was the victim, throwing around accusations that I was trying to ruin her. Meanwhile, I worked with my lawyer to file the official divorce papers. We demanded full custody of the house, the bank accounts, and a forensic audit to uncover every hidden dollar. I also made sure to notify the bank and the attorney handling her secret loan, so they'd freeze any further transactions. I was furious when I found out she'd been planning this for months, borrowing money secretly and trying to hide her affair. She'd been lying to me the entire time, and I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. But now I was taking control. I started documenting every interaction, every lie, every attempt she made to manipulate the situation. I wanted her to see I was serious about fighting for what's rightfully mine. One night, she tried to guilt-trip me, crying and saying she was sorry, but that she needed to be free, that she deserved half because she'd been with me all these years. I looked at her coldly and told her I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. I was going to fight for every penny, every asset, and for my dignity. I told her she made her choices, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. It was clear she was panicking. She started throwing around more accusations, trying to turn the situation around on me, claiming I was abusive or controlling. But I had the proof, texts, bank statements, evidence of the loan, that she'd been lying to everyone. Her game was coming apart at the seams. I knew this was just the beginning of a long legal battle, but I was ready. I'd never felt more determined to stand my ground. As I sat there reflecting on everything, I realized this whole nightmare had changed me. I'd trusted her completely and she'd thrown it all away. But I also knew I had to stay strong, for myself and for what I'd built. I'd learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what's yours, and I was prepared to do just that. I wasn't going to let her take my house, my savings, or my pride without a fight. She wanted to burn everything down. Well, I was going to make sure I was the one left standing when the smoke cleared. The final stretch of this nightmare has been the hardest. After filing for divorce, everything intensified. The lawyer tried to drag out negotiations, claiming she deserved half the assets, citing years of marriage and emotional support. But I had the evidence to counter every claim. I pushed for a full accounting of all her hidden money, the secret loan from her boss, and the bank transfers she tried to hide. The forensic accountant uncovered more than I expected: multiple small transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, payments to private investigators, and even a few suspicious cash withdrawals. The courtroom. Battles were tense, but I felt confident. I had the truth on my side. Attempts to manipulate the situation fell flat when faced with concrete proof. She kept insisting she was the victim, of my controlling ways, of my lack of support, of her need to find herself, but I knew better. She'd betrayed me in the worst way possible, and now she was trying to spin it to save her own skin. What finally broke her was the evidence of her borrowing the $50, $0 from her boss. That loan was a clear sign of her desperation, and it proved she'd been planning her departure for months. Her attempts to deny it all only made her look more guilty. When the judge reviewed the evidence, it was clear she had no leg to stand on. The court ordered her to pay back the loan, and I was awarded full custody of the house, the bank accounts, and the assets we'd accumulated over the years. The aftermath was a mix of relief and bitter disappointment. I moved out of the house, leaving her behind, and started rebuilding my life. I knew I'd never fully trust her again, but I also learned that sometimes you have to fight to protect what's yours, your home, your money, your dignity. I realized that betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you who you really are. I've come out of this stronger, more cautious, and more aware of the importance of trust and honesty in a relationship. Looking back, I wish I could have seen the signs sooner, but I also know that I did everything I could to hold onto what mattered. If there's one thing I want other guys to take away from this, it's that you can't ignore the red flags. When your gut tells you something's wrong, don't dismiss it. Get the proof, stand your ground, and fight for what's rightfully yours. Because in the end, betrayal might tear things apart, but it also shows you who you really are and what you're willing to fight for.